The transport ship drifted over a forgotten mining world. Its face was gray and torn, pitted by old drills and blasts. To the human crew, it looked like a dead stone. No traffic, no lights, no sign of life. Yet command had sent them anyway. Strange signals had been heard, weak, broken, coming from deep under the ground like a breath that refused to die. Captain Rook stood at the wide window as the planet rolled past. His jaw was steady, but something inside him pulled tight. He had walked battlefields and ruins before. He had seen cities turn to smoke. But this world felt different. The scanners showed thin lines of energy far below, the kind that should not exist here. Like lanterns covered by ash. "Prep a landing team," Rook said. His voice was calm. It also carried the weight of someone who knew trouble when he saw it. The shuttle fell through yellow clouds and saw-teeth lightning. Dust swarmed the hull. The world answered with silence. Towers of rusted machines rose from the plain like bones of giants. No birds, no wind. Only the low moan of metal in the breeze. Boots hit ash. The ground sank a little with each step. Dr. Sana, the science lead, held a scanner close to her chest. Green dots blinked, faint and uneven. "The signal is here," she said. "From the old mine shafts. The pattern is wrong, it's irregular." She paused, almost like crying. The word hung in the air. No one spoke. Crying on a dead world. They moved toward the main shaft. Rails lay shattered in the dust. Chains dangled from hooks, whispering when the wind passed. The first tunnel swallowed their lamps. Walls sweated black water. Every step echoed for a long time, as if the rock had a memory. The deeper they went, the louder the pulses became. Not a machine's rhythm, not a warning beacon. Something softer, broken. The team slowed. Rifles rose. No one wanted to say it. Everyone knew. A sound reached them at last. Not the scrape of metal, not the hiss of air. A small sound. A whimper, then another, then many. Thin voices, afraid. The tunnel opened into a wide chamber. Lights swung across the dark. What they found stopped them cold. Cages, dozens of them. Iron bars, bolted doors. Locks eaten by rust. Inside, shapes curled against the cold. So small that for a moment the humans thought the shapes were tricks of the lamp. Then one lifted its head. Eyes reflected the light. Wide, hollow, alive. Children. Not human, but children all the same. Some had soft blue skin that shimmered like rain. Some were gray and thin with faint scales at the neck. One had fine feathers along the arms. Another had pale white skin and silver eyes that seemed too big for the face. They were all bones and shadows. They were all afraid. Gasps broke from the team. A whisper slipped out of someone's throat. Who could do this? Captain Rook stepped forward. He lowered his rifle. He knelt by the nearest cage. A child with silver eyes crawled closer, fingers clutching the bars. Rook kept his hands open. "It's all right," he said softly. "We won't hurt you." The child flinched but did not move away. Behind those eyes, fear lived with something else. A small spark. Hope, thin as a thread. Dr. Sana scanned through the bars. Her voice shook. Severe malnutrition. Bone density low. Different species. Different ages. This has been going on for years. She looked up at Rook. This is not an accident. Someone used this world as a prison. The room felt colder. A soldier swallowed hard. "Sir, what are your orders?" Rook stood. The lamps caught his face and turned his eyes to steel. He had seen armies break. He had held dying friends. But he had never seen chains on children. His answer came from somewhere deep and old. "We take them out," he said. "All of them. Then we find the hands that built these cages." The team moved. Locks cracked. Hinges screamed. Blankets wrapped around small shoulders. Some children cried. Some made no sound at all. Some clung to the first human hand they touched and would not let go. As they carried them through the tunnel, the sound of whimpers turned into soft, steady breathing. The sound of trust, new and fragile. More cages waited in the dark. More small faces. More thin arms reaching for light. The count rose past dozens. Then past 100. The team stopped counting. Numbers felt wrong here. Lives were what mattered. They reached the surface under a sky the color of bruised gold. The shuttle engines warmed. The air filled with dust and the faint, strange music of different languages trying to be brave. Captain Rook stood at the ramp and looked out at the dead machines, the silent horizon. This place was a monument to cruelty. It had been quiet for a long time. It would not be quiet anymore. He touched his comm. "Bridge, this is Rook. Go ahead, Captain. Signal Earth." His voice was low and clear. "Report what we found below. Children, not ours. Many species." A pause. "Copy, sir. Anything else?" Rook watched a medic lift a feathered child into a blanket. He listened to the soft, stubborn sound of survival in the cabin. When he spoke again, his words were steady as stone. "Tell them this is only the start." The ramp lifted. The shuttle rose. The mind fell away. In the cabin, small hands held tight to human gloves. Eyes closed. Eyes opened. Somewhere, a tiny voice tried a new word in a new tongue. Safe. Captain Rook did not smile. He did not need to. He looked at his crew, then passed them to the stars. Whatever made these cages was still out there. Whatever wore those chains like a crown would hear from Earth. "Send the pulse," he said. "All channels." Far above the dead world, the ship turned its nose toward home, and the message left like a spark seeking dry grass. The medical bay of the Artemis Dawn hummed softly as it carried its fragile cargo through the void. Rows of beds lined the walls, each holding a small alien child wrapped in thermal blankets. Machines whispered around them, scanning, healing, keeping them alive. The air smelled of disinfectant and metal, but under it all was something else. Quiet heartbreak. Dr. Sana moved from bed to bed, her face drawn and pale under the white lights. "Their systems are shutting down," she said quietly to the nurse beside her. "They've been starved for too long. Some can't even process food anymore." She glanced at one of the children, a tiny blue-skinned girl with bruises running along her spine, and her throat tightened. Who could do this? Across the room, Captain Rook stood with his arms folded, watching the monitors. The reflection of the stars shimmered in his eyes. Every screen told a story. Weak pulses, shallow breaths, fear even in sleep. These weren't prisoners of war. They were victims of something much worse. When Earth Command received the message, disbelief rippled through the network. But images didn't lie. Within hours, transmissions spread across human space, pictures of cages, of the alien children's hollow faces. The Council called for an emergency assembly, and when the Artemis Dawn reached Earth orbit, the world was already waiting. Crowds gathered at the landing platforms. Scientists, journalists, soldiers, everyone wanted to see if the rumors were true. As the shuttle doors opened, silence fell. Medics stepped out carrying children in their arms. Cameras flashed, but no one spoke. The galaxy had known war, famine, even slavery. But this was something older, something darker. In the council hall, Captain Rook stood beneath a massive display showing the recordings from the mine tunnels. Cages lined in rows, small figures pressing weakly against the bars, the sound of crying echoing through the dark. The chamber was silent as the footage played. When it ended, no one moved. Dr. Sana stepped forward, her voice trembling but sharp. "We've confirmed 37 species among the rescued children," she said, holding a datapad filled with medical reports. None of them were ever reported missing. Their homeworlds filed no alerts. Their council said nothing. She looked up, eyes filled with cold fury, which means they knew. Or they chose to ignore it. A murmur spread through the chamber, shock, denial, shame. Some of the alien diplomats lowered their heads. Others whispered excuses. Rook's gaze swept across them all. He had fought beside many of these races. He had believed in them. Now he saw only silence. Who did this? Someone finally asked. Who would enslave children? A small voice answered. Not Rook's, not Sana's. The silver-eyed boy from the mine stood beside a translator, his voice thin but steady. They wore the mark of fire, he said. The machine repeated it in dozens of languages, echoing across the hall. The mark of fire, every commander knew it. The emblem of the Crimson Accord, a shadow empire that ruled the slave markets in the outer reach. They were rich, powerful, and untouchable. For centuries, no one had dared speak against them. A chill passed through the room. The diplomats looked away. No one wanted to challenge the Accord. No one dared. Rook's jaw tightened. His voice came out like steel. No one dared, he said, echoing the thought aloud. But we will. The chamber erupted. Captain, you can't. This could start a war. The Accord controls half the... Rook didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This isn't war, he said. This is justice. Dr. Sana nodded beside him. And justice begins with truth. She activated the broadcast system. Every screen on Earth and every relay within human space flickered to life. The images played again, the cages, the children, the chains. The message was clear and unfiltered. The truth could no longer be buried. In hours, billions saw it. Across distant colonies, people wept, raged, and swore vengeance. On alien worlds, ordinary citizens began to ask questions their rulers couldn't answer. The silence of the galaxy cracked. The Crimson Accord responded in fire. Their warlords appeared on the holonets, sneering through smoke and gold. "If Earth spreads lies, we will burn their worlds," one declared. "Their fleets will drown in our fires." Captain Rook stood before his command crew aboard the Artemis Dawn and watched the broadcast end. He said nothing for a moment. Then slowly he turned toward his officers. "Then let them come," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through every deck. "Because for every cage they built will bring a storm they'll never forget." Outside, the fleets of Earth began to gather, dark shapes moving through the stars, carrying soldiers who had seen the faces of the enslaved and swore they would not stand by. War was coming. But this time it wasn't for conquest or power. This time it was for the children. The black of space stretched endlessly around the Earth fleet, silent and cold. Hundreds of human warships drifted together like a storm waiting to break. Their hulls bore no color, no insignia, only matte black steel that swallowed starlight. Engines burned low, ready to strike. In the center of the formation, the flagship Artemis Dawn led the armada. Captain Rook stood on the bridge, staring at the star map projected before him. Red symbols covered the display, each one a known slave hub of the Crimson Accord. Each one a wound on the galaxy. His jaw clenched as his gaze settled on their first target. Cora Prime, a world of gold towers and crimson banners. It was the beating heart of the Accord's slave trade, a place where lives were sold like metal. "Jump coordinates locked," the navigator said. "Engage," Rook replied, space folded. The fleet vanished into the void. When they emerged, the skies above Cora Prime glowed blood red. The planet was wrapped in defense rings and orbital fortresses. Patrol fleets moved in neat formation, confident and unafraid. No one had ever attacked Cora. No one had dared. Until now. Rook looked out over the battlefield. Target only the markets, the fortresses, and the ships marked with the Accord's emblem. No cities, no homes. "We're not them." Then in a voice cold as iron he said, "Fire!" The void exploded into light. Human railguns roared. Plasma bolts carved through the black. Missiles streaked toward their marks like shooting stars. The Accord's defense fleet scrambled in panic. Their commanders shouted over comms, their arrogance cracking as their warships turned to flame. On the planet below, the surface trembled. Towers split apart. Great domes housing the slave auctions collapsed into dust. Fires spread through golden streets. In one of the underground chambers, thousands of imprisoned beings looked up as explosions shook the walls. They didn't know who was attacking. They only knew the sound wasn't the same cruel laughter they had heard for years. Dropships pierced the clouds. Human Marines stormed through the smoke, weapons raised, hearts steady. They were not conquerors, they were deliverers. Sergeant Vega led one of the landing squads. He kicked open a steel door and froze. The chamber beyond stretched wide, rows upon rows of cages filled with hundreds of children and younglings. Their eyes reflected fear and confusion. Vega felt his throat tighten. He slowly lowered his rifle and dropped it to the ground. "No weapons," he told his team. "They've seen enough guns." He stepped forward, hands open. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No one's going to hurt you again." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a small green-skinned child crept forward, touching the floor as if expecting pain. Vega knelt, smiling through tears he didn't notice. The child reached out and clung to his hand. Then others followed, dozens, then hundreds, reaching, trembling, holding onto the armor of strangers who had come from the stars. Above, the battle raged. The Accord's ships fell one by one. Their grand fleets, the same ones that had terrorized worlds for centuries, crumbled before human precision. The Artemis Dawn tore through their cruisers like a blade through cloth. "Captain, enemy reinforcements incoming," the comm officer reported. "Let them come," Rook said. "They'll see what humanity does when it finds monsters hiding behind crowns." As the last of the slave markets burned, Rook and his crew descended to the surface. The air was thick with smoke and dust. The once proud spires of Cora were nothing but ruins. Inside the largest auction hall, the richest slavers had gathered, their crimson robes stained with fear. When the humans entered, they screamed threats, promises, bargains, none of it mattered. Rook walked among them, his boots echoing over marble floors. "You sold children," he said quietly. "And you thought no one would come," the slavers begged. Some reached for weapons. None succeeded. When it ended, the silence that followed felt like judgment itself. He stepped to the balcony and looked over the burning city. Fires danced on every horizon. The cages were empty now. The freed slaves stood together, watching the sky as human ships passed overhead. Some wept. Some raised their hands toward the stars. Rook opened his comm and spoke to the galaxy. "This is not war," he said. "This is justice. Wherever there are chains, we will break them. Wherever there are children in cages, we will come." The message spread faster than light. Every world saw it. Every ruler heard it. For the first time in living memory, the Crimson Accord's great markets had fallen, and the destroyers were human. Across the galaxy, whispers began. On hidden worlds, slaves murmured the name Earth like a prayer. And in the gilded halls of the Accord, warlords trembled, because Cora Prime was only the first. And Captain Rook had already chosen the next. Smoke and starlight filled the void. The wreckage of the Crimson Accord's fleet drifted across space, silent, glowing with the faint light of dying engines. Yet even as one world burned, another waited. Humanity did not stop. The Artemis Dawn led the second wave, joined now by dozens of ships rebuilt, refitted, and burning with purpose. Every crewman carried the same image in their minds, the faces of the children they had saved. The war had begun. Captain Rook stood at the command deck, his hands resting on the console. Before him, the holomap shimmered with red, each mark a planet that fed the Accord's empire of chains. "They'll expect us to strike the trade hubs," said Commander Hayes, his second in command. "But the real rot is deeper. They hide their breeding camps, their labor worlds under false registry." "Then we dig," Rook replied. His voice was calm, but the air around him felt like storm clouds ready to break. "Every lie they've buried, we'll drag it into the light." The next strike was against Drain Station, a fortress orbiting a molten world where the Accord forced prisoners to mine volatile crystals. For centuries, those mines had built their warships. Now they would become their graves. The human fleet jumped in silently. The Accord's ships barely had time to react. Within minutes, plasma fire cut through their formation. Dropships dove into the storm of debris, landing on the surface where slaves worked under the whips of overseers. Sergeant Vega led the ground assault. The air burned with heat, and every breath tasted of ash. As they breached the gates, they found workers chained to drills, their bodies covered in dust and scars. "Stand back," Vega shouted, smashing the locks with the butt of his rifle. The slaves flinched, confused, unable to believe what they saw. "You're free," Vega said. "Go, run!" One old miner stared at him with disbelief. "Free?" he whispered, as if the word was a myth. Vega's voice cracked. "Yes, you're free." And when the chains fell, they didn't just fall to the ground, they fell through the galaxy. In system after system, the pattern repeated. On Valis 9, human engineers cut through ice prisons where children lay half-frozen. On Mursa, they stormed swamps and liberated labor camps that had existed for generations. On Arelon, they freed an entire colony of artificers forced to build ships for their own masters. Each victory sent shockwaves through the stars. But each strike also drew blood. The Accord was not blind. Their warlords screamed across their networks, demanding vengeance. They unleashed fleets twice the size of Earth's. Great armadas poured from the Crimson Core, burning human outposts and colonies on the frontier. News reached the Artemis Dawn. Whole settlements were gone. Civilians, families erased. The Council back on Earth urged caution, but Captain Rook's reply was simple. There is no turning back. Not while they still hold a single chain. When the next assault came, it was massive. Hundreds of enemy ships emerged from the void, surrounding human forces near Raven Gate, a choke point in the Orion corridor. On the bridge, alarms screamed. "They outnumber us 8-1, shouted Hayes. Rook's gaze didn't waver. "Good," he said quietly. "That means we won't have to go looking for them." The fleet held the line. Human warships fought like wolves, fast, coordinated, ruthless. They darted between the Accord's heavier cruisers, striking their engines, cutting their supply ships, setting traps. For every human vessel destroyed, 3 enemy ships went down in flames. When the smoke cleared, Raven Gate was littered with the wrecks of the Accord's proudest fleet. Humanity had survived the impossible again. But the cost was heavy. The Artemis Dawn limped from the battle, hull torn, engines failing. Dozens of soldiers were dead. Hundreds more were wounded. Yet none spoke of retreat. In the medical bay, Dr. Sana tended to the injured. Her hands trembled as she cleaned blood from a soldier's face. "How many more?" she whispered. Rook stood behind her, silent for a long time. "As many as it takes," he said at last. Later, as the fleet regrouped, Rook sent a message across every channel. His voice was steady, cold, and filled with purpose. "To the Crimson Accord," he said, "you've built your empire on the pain of children. You've ruled through fear, thinking no one would stand against you. Look at the stars. Look at the fire. That's humanity coming for you." Across alien worlds, that message was replayed in secret. In dim homes, in crowded factories, in underground tunnels, slaves watched and listened. And for the first time in centuries, they dared to hope. On one of those worlds, a young slave whispered to her friend, "Do you think they'll come here?" Her friend, still bruised, still afraid, nodded slowly. "They will. The humans always come." The fire had begun to spread, and the galaxy would never be silent again. The fires of Raven Gate still burned in the memory of every soldier aboard the Artemis Dawn. The price had been steep, but humanity had proven something the galaxy could no longer deny. They could not be broken. Yet as the fleet regrouped and repairs began, new reports poured in from across the stars. Entire planets were rising. Chains were being shattered not by humans, but by the enslaved themselves. The fire had spread beyond control. Captain Rook stood at the forward deck, his gaze locked on the blue haze of hyperspace. "Status?" he asked. "Fleet integrity at 60%, Commander Hayes replied. "Reinforcements from Mars Station arriving within 3 cycles. Civilian unrest reported across 7 Accord worlds. The slaves are rebelling, sir." Rook didn't look away from the stars. "Good," he said softly. "Then we're not alone anymore." On the world of Valoria, once a jewel of the Accord, the uprising had already begun. Factories that had forged weapons for centuries now burned under the hands of their former workers. When the humans arrived, they didn't come as saviors, they came as allies. Human Marines marched beside alien rebels, tearing down the crimson banners that had ruled their skies for generations. Dr. Sana moved through the ruins of an Accord fortress, her scanner glowing. "These aren't soldiers," she said quietly, kneeling beside the remains of a collapsed holding pen. "They used this place to break families, to separate children by species." Sergeant Vega stood beside her, his jaw tight. "Then we'll make sure they can never use it again." He raised his rifle and fired a single shot into the fortress's fuel line. Flames erupted, spreading fast. Behind him, a crowd of freed workers cheered as the building collapsed in on itself. But for every victory, the Accord struck back with fury. In the capital world of Nemor, the Warlords gathered in the throne hall of fire. The chamber glowed crimson, the air thick with incense and anger. "They defy us," snarled one of the High Lords, his eyes glowing under his helm. "The humans have turned our slaves into an army. They must be made an example," another hissed. "Their worlds will burn, their colonies will drown in blood." At the head of the chamber, Lord Kael Varos, the Grand Marshal of the Crimson Accord, rose from his throne. His armor was engraved with the mark of fire. The same sigil burned into the children's cages. "Then we will remind them who rules the stars," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Gather the armadas, every fleet, every weapon. Bring me Earth's head." The storm came without warning. Human outposts on the edge of the frontier fell one by one. Entire colonies were erased under waves of plasma fire. The Accord unleashed weapons that burned through atmospheres, leaving only glass and silence. For the first time since the war began, humanity bled. On the bridge of the Artemis Dawn, emergency transmissions filled the air. Distress calls, civilians begging for rescue, whole worlds disappearing. Dr. Sana looked up from her console, her voice trembling. "Captain, we can't save them all." Rook's eyes were cold steel. "No," he said, "but we'll make damn sure the Accord never forgets what they did." He turned toward the communications array. "Open a channel." Full spectrum. The comm officer hesitated. "To who, sir?" "To everyone." The captain's voice thundered through every ship, every station, every world within reach of human signal. "This is Captain Rook of the Earth Fleet. The Crimson Accord believes fear will make us bow. But they are wrong. They have burned our colonies, slaughtered our people, and chained the children of 100 worlds. No more, we are done running. From this day, every Accord world, every fleet, every throne of theirs will fall until not one cage stands in this galaxy." He paused. The silence afterward was heavier than space itself. "To those still enslaved," he said, his tone softer now, "hold fast. We're coming. To those who stand against us, pray to whatever gods you still have. Because humanity is done watching." The broadcast ended. In the hours that followed, rebel forces across the galaxy rallied behind that voice. The oppressed saw not a human captain but a promise, a fire that refused to die. On worlds where slaves had been silent for generations, banners of rebellion were raised. The words "We are coming" appeared scrawled on walls, screens, and shattered doors. And far across the stars, in the command chambers of the Crimson Accord, Lord Varos watched the transmission in silence. His lips curved into a cruel smile. "Then let the fire come," he whispered. "We will drown it in blood," but he was wrong. Humanity's fire wasn't something that could be drowned. It was already spreading, burning brighter, fiercer, unstoppable. And as the fleet prepared to jump again, Captain Rook whispered the words that had become a vow across every deck of every human ship. No more chains. Not ever again. The war had become a storm. It crashed from one system to the next. Fires burned in the skies. Planets shook. The Crimson Accord struck back with every weapon it had. Yet the galaxy no longer cowered. Rebels rose. Freed slaves fought. Human ships sailed with allies at their sides. Captain Rook watched the reports stack up on his console. Each screen told a new story of pain and courage. Cities held. Cities fell. The cost was heavy, but the goal was clear. Break the Accord at its heart. "Vir is next," Commander Hayes said. His voice was flat. "Their capital. Their throne world." The name made the bridge fall quiet. Vir was more than a city. It was a fortress. It was a machine of war and terror. Its orbit was a wall of steel. Its fleets were endless. Many had failed before. Many had turned away. Rook did not turn away. His hands tightened on the rail. "We gather everyone we can," he said. "We strike at once. Precision, not fury. We cut their legs so the head cannot move." They built a plan that read like a map of the enemy's fear. Human pilots flew silent runs to map the defense rings. Engineers studied the Accord's code. Rebels on the inside fed names, routes, weak points. They found the shadows behind the armor, supply lines, command relays, the routes slaves used to move unseen. They stitched those threads into a plan. Sabotage and open doors, Dr. Sana told the strike teams. "We do not need to level the city. We need to break its grip." The fleet moved like a hand closing. First came a strike of shadow ships, small, fast. They slipped through gaps in the Accord's sensors. They slipped explosive eggs into fuel depots and reactor cores. They did not wait for applause. They vanished into dust. Then came the flood. Human cruisers hit the outer defenses with everything they had. The Accord answered with a wall of fire. Space lit up with death. The Artemis Dawn took hits. Hull plates glowed red. Fighters fell. Men and women shouted in alarms. The cost mounted. On the ground the sound was worse. Thunder than glass. Towers fell. The streets of Vir became rivers of smoke and ash. But inside the chaos something else moved. Small teams of freed slaves and human commandos slipped through alleys. They were the ones who knew the city best now. They opened gates. They cut locks. Where they walked, chains fell. Sergeant Vega led one of those teams. He had maps burned into his brain. He moved with a quiet fury. They fought through guard posts and into the factories where robots still beat at forges. There they found rooms like the mines. The same sick cages where children were once kept. The sight hit Vega like a blade. He forced his face to steel and broke the doors open. The rescued clung to him and to each other. But the Accord had fought long and learned harder. Ambushes waited in shadows. Fleets hit human reinforcements as they tried to land. A strike team lost its shuttle to a hidden battery. A rebel cell was betrayed by a commander who chose the gold of the crown over his people's freedom. The betrayal stung harder than any laser. In orbit, an engineer named Miri did work that would not be sung in songs. She crawled through a ruined support bay of the Artemis Dawn, fingers numb with cold rewiring an ancient relay. Her hands slipped. Sparks danced. She breathed in, forced her fingers to stay steady, and bridged a line that let the fleet drop a dead zone into the enemy's sensor net. For a moment, the Accord could not see them. For a moment, the humans and their allies moved unseen. Miri's face burned with sweat and oil. She did her work and walked away without a word. The battle for Vir was long. Days bled into nights without difference. Each gain cost lives. Each victory demanded another price. Human carriers burned. Port towns smoldered. Rebel units celebrated with what little water they had. Then came the turning hour. Deep in the throne spire, higher than any sky, sat the command corps of the Accord's armadas. If that corps fell, the fleets would splinter. If it stood, the war would become endless.
Rook led the final push. He walked into the throne spire with a small band, soldiers, engineers, a handful of freed slaves who knew secret doors and stairways. The halls glimmered with gold and hatred. Warlords in crimson armor screamed and lunged. But Rook and his team moved like a blade. They were hungry and tired, and they kept moving. At the top, they found the core room. It was a cathedral of machines. Screens glowed with battle maps. A central console pulsed like a beating heart. Around it stood Lord Kael Veros, blood on his robes, anger in his eyes. He had the mark of fire burned into his gauntlet. He did not look surprised. He looked like a king who expected blood to come for him. "You think you can end me?" Veros snarled. His voice echoed like thunder in the metal halls. Rook did not answer with words. He stepped forward and lifted his rifle. But before the first shot could fall, alarms screamed. The Accord had one last trick. 100 hidden batteries awakened. The spire shook. Walkways collapsed. The floor beneath Rook's feet crumbled. In an instant, everything became noise. Men shouted. Metal screamed. Rook felt a searing heat brush his shoulder. He fell. Around him, comrades were pinned, crushed, lost. He saw Hayes go down, chest stained with blood. He saw Dr. Sana dragged under a falling beam, her hand gripping a datapad that flashed one last warning. Yet even as the spire died, something stubborn remained. The engineers had done their work. The relay mirrored bridged in orbit sent a pulse that staggered the core. The Accord's fleets hung in the void like wounded beasts. The command net flickered. Rook pushed himself up, tasting iron. He limped toward the central console. Veros was still standing, but the grin had left his face. He reached for something at his side, an old ceremonial dagger, a relic of cruelty. Rook raised his rifle. His hands shook. He thought of the children in cages. He thought of Miri rewiring relays and Vega breaking locks. He thought of every life that had been taken and every life they had saved. He squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed. It hit the console. Sparks flew. The core spasmed. Outside, a sound rolled like thunder. The Accord fleet stuttered. Ships began to fall from the sky. The hangars closed. The throne spire trembled. But the cost was high. The central chamber lit in a white heat. A wave of energy ripped through corridors. Rook felt the world tilt. The last thing he saw before black took him was Veros's face, gone from pride, now broken and small. When Rook opened his eyes, the world smelled of smoke and salt. He lay on a floor strewn with bodies and ash. Around him, survivors pulled themselves up. Many were gone. Many more would never move again. The throne domes burned on the horizon. The Accord's banner sagged. The core had been wounded. The fleets were scattered. Vir was not yet fallen, but its spine had been snapped. Rook tried to stand. Pain laced his limbs. He felt the weight of what they had done, and the weight of what it would take. He looked at the sky. Human ships hovered, scared and smoking, but still there. Rebels on the ground raised flags of different colors, torn, but held high. Dr. Sana crawled to his side. Her hands were black with soot. She breathed hard. "We hurt them," she said. "We broke the spine. They can't move as one." Rook nodded. He tasted blood on his lips. He tasted loss. He tasted a fierce, quiet hope. "Then finish it," he whispered. Around them, in the ruin and smoke, a new sound began. It was not the scream of lasers. It was not the cry of pain. It was the slow, gathering shout of a galaxy that would not be silent. The skies above Vir burned red as the last of the Accord's fleets fell from orbit. Massive ships broke apart in silent explosions, scattering molten debris across the atmosphere. Below, the capital of the Crimson Accord, the world that had enslaved half the galaxy, was collapsing. Fires devoured the towers that once gleamed with gold. Chains that had hung for centuries now lay shattered in the streets. Captain Rook stood on the shattered balcony of the throne spire, the wind clawing at his burned uniform. His right arm was bound, his shoulder bleeding through torn fabric. Around him, soldiers and freed slaves stood in stunned silence. The war that had seemed endless was ending, right here, right now. Dr. Sana limped to his side, clutching her scorched datapad. "It's done," she said. Her voice was soft, almost unbelieving. "The Accord's command net is gone. Their fleets have no leaders left." Rook looked out over the burning city. "No," he said quietly. "It's not done. Not yet." Below them, millions of beings, former slaves, prisoners, the forgotten of the galaxy, filled the streets. They had nothing left but freedom. They shouted, they sang, they wept. The sound rose like thunder rolling across the broken world. Sergeant Vega climbed the steps toward his captain, armor blackened with soot. "Sir, transmissions are coming in from every sector," he said. "Rebellions everywhere. The Accord's systems are collapsing. Worlds we've never even seen are rising up." Rook closed his eyes for a long moment, listening. "Then it's begun," he murmured. "The galaxy is remembering what it means to stand." 3 days later, the surviving fleets of Earth and their allies gathered in orbit over Vir. Ships of every kind, human dreadnoughts, alien frigates, even converted slave transports, formed a silent wall of steel around the dead capital. The once golden planet now glowed with fire, but no one mourned its fall. It had been built on bones. A broadcast beacon hummed on the Artemis dawn. Every camera, every comm link, every screen in the galaxy waited. This was the moment the stars would remember. Captain Rook stepped into the light. His uniform was torn, his face scarred, but his voice was steady. "To the people of the galaxy," he began, his words echoing into every world. "The Crimson Accord is no more. Their fleets are broken. Their throne burns. Their leaders are gone. But this victory does not belong to Earth alone. It belongs to every voice that refused to stay silent, every hand that broke a chain, every heart that still believed freedom was worth the fight." He paused, breathing the smoke-filled air. "We came here because we found children in cages. We saw what you were too afraid to see. We heard cries that had echoed for centuries. And we said, no more. Not for them. Not for anyone." He looked directly into the camera. His eyes burned with exhaustion and resolve. "Today, the chains are broken. But tomorrow, there will be others who try to rebuild them. They will wear different faces, fly different flags, but they will always come. When they do, remember this day. Remember what happens when you cage the children of the stars." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, silence reigned for a heartbeat. Then came the roar. On thousands of worlds, people cheered, cried, and fell to their knees. Slaves on distant moons raised their arms to the sky. Former rebels stood beside human marines, staring at the dawn of something new. Humanity did not claim thrones. They did not plant flags. They took nothing but the memory of fire and the promise that they would return if the stars ever forgot what freedom cost. Later, in the quiet of the Artemis Dawn's observation deck, Dr. Sana found Rook alone, watching the wreckage drift through the void. "You should rest," she said gently. He shook his head. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see them. The cages, the children. They're safe now," she said. "Because of you." Rook turned to her, a faint, tired smile on his face. "Not because of me, because of us. Because humanity didn't turn away." She stepped closer. "What will you do now?" Rook looked back at the burning planet, then toward the distant stars. "We rebuild. We help them heal. And when someone, somewhere, tries to raise chains again," he straightened, his voice quiet but unshakable, "we remind them that humanity still remembers." Outside, the fires of Vir flickered and died. The light of dawn stretched across the planet's horizon, a dawn not for one world, but for all of them. And as the Artemis dawn turned toward the stars, its engines cutting through the darkness, one message pulsed through every surviving relay, written in 1,000 languages, carried on waves of light and code. Humanity is not silent. Humanity is fire. The galaxy would never forget.